Hello, everyone. This is Johna Johnson. I'm here with my colleague Jerry Murphy, and we are here to talk about switching SOC providers, Security Operations Center providers. I'm sure that's a really fun topic for a lot of folks. So, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. First of all, if you're wondering where the name came from, as we were working on this project, I just kept thinking about the song So Long Marianne from Leonard Cohen. So, it's So Long SOC Provider. Um, as we get started, I just want to highlight that, as you'll see in some upcoming slides, having a security operations center is a good idea. Now, that may seem like motherhood and apple pie, but I just want to stress that it's really, really important for either enterprises and small businesses to have someone monitoring their cybersecurity on an ongoing basis 24/7, doing things like threat hunting, doing things like protection and updating, and all those good things. If you don't do that, your cybersecurity stance is going to be adversely affected, is the way to put it. However, as you'll see from our research, overall companies, it's generally a terrible idea. Well, not a terrible idea, but a bad idea to outsource. But that really depends on who you are, how big you are, and what you're doing. So we'll talk about that in just a second. As I mentioned, if you look at the success comparison, you can see that having an internally staffed security operations center actually is more common in the success group than having it as an outsourced or managed service. Now, you're probably watching this going, what the hell is a success group? And that is a legit question. What we do when we do our research is we measure a handful of cybersecurity metrics that are objective and tell us sort of at a glance how good someone's cybersecurity initiative is. And very specifically, we look at the median total time to contain a breach. The logic behind that is that everyone gets attacked. It's just a matter of how quickly you can contain the breach. We focus on containment rather than remediation because remediation is a function of how large and complex your environment is and the nature of the breach. The idea is you just want to sort of throw a glass jar over the insect and keep it from doing any further harm. That's containment. And we look at the median time because obviously breaches can be any sort. They can range from the relatively minor to the catastrophic, and your response to them can be very quick or very long. So we look at the MTTC, median total time to contain a breach, as a success metric. And then what we do, and this is one of the slides that compares this, is we look at what people who are successful are doing differently than people who are less successful. So people with a lower, i.e. more successful MTTC, what are they doing differently? And as I said, generally, staffing their own SOCs correlates with a better performance on cybersecurity metrics, a lower MTTC. But as we said in the beginning, the devil's in the details. So here's a whole lot of text and numbers. Net, if you look at this, if you look at having a SOC is definitely correlates with success, and you can see the median MTTC for the folks who don't have versus the folks who have, and that's in minutes. And you can see that having a SOC improves your MTTC by 43%. But the magic is you break down by employee count, so big companies versus small companies, with a breakdown inflection point at about 2,500 employees. And what we found was for smaller companies, you actually decrease your cybersecurity success. That is, you increase your MTTC to 285 minutes if you are managing the SOC internally. So for smaller companies, you really want to be managing your SOC externally, having an outsourced provider, because you will have an improvement of 50% on your MTTC. So if you kind of look at this, that top row is everybody all together, big and small companies all together. And the typical MTTC is 3 hours, 180 minutes. If you're a small company and you are managing the SOC internally, you're going to have a much lower and a much worse MTTC of 185 minutes. But if you're managing it externally, you're going to cut that in half and have a 90-minute MTTC. If you're a large company, so you're somebody that has over 2,500 employees, it's exactly the opposite. Your MTTC managed internally is 90 minutes, and MTTC managed externally is 270 minutes. In other words, big companies should insource, small companies should outsource. Now, that's a very, very general rule of thumb. And we are not always, we see large companies that are outsourcing and we see small companies that very successfully insource. So remember, there's always going to be outliers, and that outlier could be you. But net, the chances are pretty good that if you're a small company, you will want to at least be considering a SOC provider.
And I'll throw out real quickly some of the experience I've had there is, because I've dealt with a lot of smaller companies, and it is variable. But what I find is if you get too small, what ends up happening is you have individual people that are wearing multiple hats. And I think the problem is if you have somebody who's doing this security stuff as a part-time job, they're going to miss stuff and they're going to lose stuff, where having somebody like a Dell SecureWorks who's just all they're doing is that, they're going to be dedicated. They're not going to miss it. However, as you get bigger and you can have somebody focused on doing these specific security tasks, they're going to know far more about their company environment than an outsourcer who's going to be doing you with 15 other people.
And Jerry, there's another point to this that you like to bring up, which is if you're a small company, how many humans do you need typically to deliver 24/7 monitoring?
Yeah, and you just can't afford it economically. So
but how many is that? That's actually a question. Like, how many people would you need to keep that going? What's your rule of thumb?
The bare minimum you need to run something 24/7 is 7 people, right? You need at least, 2 people per shift, one to keep the other person awake, and you need a manager. So at a minimum, you need 7 people just to do something 24/7, and that's bare minimum. Most of the time, it's like 9. Right? Because you have a shift leader on there plus an overall manager. So it's usually more like 9. And so again, if you're small enough where what you need economically is 3 people or 2.5 people, then you're either wasting a ton of money, or what's happening is you're doing a half-assed job of it because you don't have 7 people on it. You have 3 people on it, and they're not doing it 24/7. They're doing it 8 to 5. And you're missing things at night, and you're just not taking care of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main point is there aren't that many small companies that I know of that can have 9 people doing nothing but SOC management.
You can't afford to do it.
You just can't. So now that we've said you probably, if you're a small company, and possibly if you're a large company, should be looking at SOC providers, what are the top things to think about? And I'll kind of jump in and talk about 2, and Jerry will kind of weigh in on those. And then Jerry will walk you through the transition plan, because he's done many of these in his former life as the CEO of a managed services company that did SOC services. He is now with us at Nemertes as our head of research and consulting. In any event, you want to look carefully at the types of providers out there, and I'll talk about what I mean by that in a minute. There's a whole set of selection criteria that we can touch on at a high level, and then you want to build out your transition plan that includes your selection process, because it'll probably take longer than you think to either migrate to a SOC provider or migrate from one SOC provider to another. So let's jump in and highlight the provider types. Basically, as we see it, there are 4 kinds of SOC providers. One kind are vendors who have a really cool product, maybe a product in management or automation or SOAR, for example, SOAR. And these folks offer SOC services around their proprietary technology. So their core business is their technology, but they're also offering their technology as a service, and that service is security operations. They have strengths and weaknesses. The big strength there is that their product may have unique capabilities, and those capabilities may match what you need. The weakness is that they're going to be very reluctant to switch products, because obviously they view the SOC services as an adjunct to their product sales. So they're really not going to be in a hurry to use some product that's not theirs. And that can be a challenge if you have particular products you want them to use. So that's something to keep in mind. Then there are the professional services firms, the folks like the E&Ys and the Deloittes. And these are folks that normally their core business is consulting, but they kind of figured out they could make some money by managing SOCs and running SOCs. Now, as the former CTO of a professional services firm, I kept my CEO away from offering SOC, any kind of SOC or NOC services, because that 24/7 operations is totally different than consulting as a business. And you'll actually see that. You may be delighted with, E&Y or Accenture or Deloitte in their pen testing, and maybe let down by how they handle their SOC services because they're totally different business models.
And not only that, but I'll throw in here real quickly that also those types of firms, when they're doing that, it tends to be an initial stepping stone for very junior people. So one, the people doing those types of things at those firms tend to be very junior. And two, they don't tend to stay there very long because that's just a stepping stone that once they get good, they'll actually go on to doing consulting, which is what they really went there for in the first place. So they tend to be junior and they tend to rotate a lot. So most of the time, we tend to find people are generally dissatisfied with those types of companies that are performing those types of SOC services.
Right. And thank you, Jerry. Then there's also telcos, and these are folks who essentially, if you think about a telecom company, aside from the network, they're basically a giant customer care company. They have customer care and 24/7 operations nailed because they've been operating NOCs for, a century. So they know what to do here. And they just figure, hey, SOC is just another flavor of Operations Center. We can do that. And in general, they're correct. They generally do a better job of the core operations than some of the other types. They can be a little bit less flexible because, hey, they're the phone company. They don't have to listen to their customers, and that culture still pertains. And Jerry, I don't know if you've seen any other negatives to telcos. They're pretty flexible. Usually they use from what I've seen, they usually use state-of-the-art technology. And if you come to them and say, listen, I want to use XYZ vendor, they'll at least listen to you, even if they don't have it on their roadmap today. Are there any negatives that you see with the telcos?
I hate to be honest about this one because this is where I came from, right? I was the CEO of a managed service company that we were basically a telco, right? So this is the environment I came from. I was doing telecommunication services and security for financial services companies. So we did a very good job of it. People were very happy. I would say, though, if I'm going to be completely honest with myself, right, because you're focused on networking infrastructure, our eyes towards security had a very network-centric flavor to them. So if the issues around security were network-centric, and it's like life is like this. If you have a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. So a lot of the security that we looked at and we were very good at tended to have a network focus. And so if the security issues were focused more on the application layer, I don't know that we had the skill and nuance to catch those issues where we were phenomenal at catching network-based issues and identity management and firewall issues and denial of service attacks. But if it was something that had a application flavor to it, we probably weren't as good as we could have been if we were just dedicated doing nothing but security.
I think that's legit. I'm glad you brought that up because, basically what we're saying is there's no magic wand here. It's not like we hate vendors or professional services companies or telcos. And the pure play folks, by the way, are people that said, hey, for whatever reason, I wanted to get into SOC as a service. This is the main thing that I want to be doing. This is all I want to be doing. And they have some of the strengths that are weaknesses for the other folks, but then they may have weaknesses themselves, being small, not necessarily able to scale, et cetera, et cetera. So bottom line is there's no perfect provider. Just know what you're getting into. And also, when you select your short or long list to assess, try to make sure there's at least one and ideally two providers from each of the types. So your short list should be at least, 7 or 8 folks minimum to look at. And if you want to narrow that down quickly, we actually have an offering that can help you with that. It's called our Quick Start RFI. Contact us. I'll mention how to do that at the end of this presentation. But long story short, you should talk to at least 7 or 8 folks, ideally 2 in each of the buckets. Now, what should you talk to them about? Here, what we're actually including are the subject headers of a much longer report that you can grab because it is actually available as a handout for folks who are listening to this webinar. But each of the subject headers and the areas focus on things like maturity and client demographics. How long have they been in business? What do their customers look like? Do they have a lot of customers that look like you? obviously you're going to be asking for reference accounts, but you should also ask for them to provide a standard. What is your standard customer profile? Because if it's very, very different from you, either in terms of industry or geographic scope or size, they may not be a great fit. Jerry, any thoughts on that before I jump to history and focus?
Um, I was thinking about this, and my only thing is when you're doing contracts with these people, and that it's less about the selection criteria, but something to think about is when you think about things like indemnification. Hey, I've got you doing something, so if you miss something, you cost my business $50 million. You owe me $50 million. I'm just going to tell nobody's going to sign up for that, right? The most anybody's ever going to guarantee is the cost of the service they're providing. So if you're paying them, $30,000 a month, $400,000 a year to provide some service, and they miss something which caused you to be liable for $50 million of fines or whatever, they're not going to pay you $50 million. Nobody's going to sign. All they're going to do at most is sign for the cost of providing you that service. So they will monitor your risk, but no service provider is going to assume the risk of your business. Just be clear, the business risk will always be yours, not this provider. So I just want to throw that out there.
That is actually an excellent point. We don't have a slide on it, but this is a great place to discuss it. So I'm glad you brought that up. History and focus is really, hey, know what type of provider you're dealing with. As as the names are bubbling into your head, you should be able to be slotting them into the buckets previously. Are they a telco? Are they a vendor? Are they a professional services firm? Policies and processes. This is a really, really, really long set of selection criteria because essentially this is the guts of what the service is that you're getting. So what are their policies? What are their processes? And we have a whole list of things you should look at. And there's probably a lot more that's not even in the report, but you really want to be looking at them. Because it's very important to understand exactly how they handle every single thing. How do they do threat hunting? How do they do forensics? How do they do onboarding? How do they transition you from technology A to technology B? There's a whole laundry list of things to look at. Staffing an organization, Jerry talked to this a little bit. You want to know everything from how long does your typical analyst stay? Where do they come from? What's their background? Are they U.S. citizens, if that's relevant to you? Are they non-U.S. citizens, if that's relevant to you? You can also be asking things like, where does your data reside? We'll get to that in a second with the internal security. What does the org chart look like? And what does the escalation chart look like? In other words, you don't want to be in a scenario where you've been breached and the only contact you have is your account rep who happened to have gone on vacation in the Bahamas that week. You really need to know everybody in your escalation internally, and you should blend them into your incident response plan as part of interacting with them. And then you want to know, what frameworks do they adhere to? Are they MITRE ATT&CK? Or are they NIST? Are they some combination of them? The problem with the frameworks is that for various reasons, they're necessary but not sufficient. You can't build out an effective security operations organization, whether it's a SOC or not, simply by following one of the frameworks. It won't work because there's things that they don't actually cover. However, you want to know that the frameworks that they adhere to are the frameworks that you happen to be aligning with. Yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
No, I was just going to say at the end of this, at the end of the day, you have a lot of different selection criteria. You're going to be comparing people that have different domains, different features and functions. It's important that what you're doing is not comparing these service providers to each other, which sounds like, of course I'm going to compare them to each other. No, compare them to your requirements, because it'd be very tempting to say, oh, this company's got all these great things, but if they're things that you can't use or of no value to you, why would you be paying for things that you don't need? And somebody else has got 5 features and functions, the other person's got 8, but the 5 are exactly what you need, and the other person is missing 2. It doesn't matter. So compare them to your requirements, not to each other.
That's an excellent, excellent point, Jerry, and I'm glad you brought that up. The other reason, and this is where I thought you were going initially, is your requirements should reflect what you need. And you should consider at every step, what would it take for us to deliver on this? So the reason for that is You then consider doing it yourself as another option. So let's say you have 7 providers and yourselves, and you should score yourselves on how well you can deliver on all of these capabilities, because that becomes super important in the decision of whether to outsource or not. If it turns out that these providers have lots and lots of wonderful capabilities, but they aren't what you need, and you can do what you need better, faster, and cheaper, then you should be insourcing, even if you're small. Under 2,500. Yeah, go ahead,
And
Jerry.
our experience is that a lot of people are much more capable than they give themselves credit for. Countless times we've had our clients that are sitting there frustrated with their SOC provider, and one of their complaints is, we know more about these security environments than they do. So then that begs the question, well, if that's true, why the hell are you giving it to them?
Why are you outsourcing? Right. So then another set of requirements should be around SLAs and XLAs. We have here overall technology and proprietary technology. There's a long laundry list of what do they use for this? What do they use for firewalls? What do they use for SOAR? What do they use for et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? You need to understand that. You need to tailor that for what you think you need in the SOC. And then the other thing you want to understand in overall technology is who owns it, right? If they have software that scans every packet for malware, or software that's doing, for example, DLP. If you migrate away from them, can you bring that software with you because you have that license, or are they keeping the license? There's no right answer. You just need to know which way it goes so that you can prepare effectively, which is the next couple slides. And then proprietary technology, a lot of times we've seen SOC providers get back to us with, oh, we do this via our black box proprietary technology. What is it? What does it do? And under what circumstances will you transition from your proprietary technology to something that's off the shelf? Because you may not need that proprietary technology, getting back to what Jerry just said. If you don't have a need for it, that's great. They may be really happy they have it, but it's not helping you.
And I'll just go up
Yeah.
there. I think even in things like security, where you got new viruses coming all the time, and so you could see in one sense, hey, having the ability to look at new things is a good thing. However, also don't denigrate the importance of having standards, standard interfaces, standard APIs, because one of the trends that we're seeing is you're going to see in time an increasing meshing between security operations and general IT operations and business operations. And we're starting to see sort of an intersection of SOCs and NOCs. And so it's becoming increasingly important to share information across these domains. So the more somebody has the ability to take whatever reports they have and give them to you in a standard format that you can then integrate with your networking information, your application information, the better you're going to be, because we're seeing these things sort of coming together over time.
And that actually sparks another observation. The chances are pretty good that in the current environment, every single provider that talks to you is going to be telling you about their great AI solution and how it does magic. And back to what Jerry said earlier, that's great. But if the magic it does isn't magic you need, then who cares? I don't care if they are God's gift to the AI universe. It's not helpful. And the other point is, if you have to devote a team to training their AI, feeding their AI with the right data, et cetera, that's going to be extra burden on you. You want to make sure that whatever they have is self-training and self-running. Last but not least, internal security. They've got the keys to the kingdom. And as Jerry said at the beginning, you are outsourcing the operations. You are not outsourcing the risk. So you really want to know what happens if they get breached. How are they keeping you from getting breached? And for example, I was alluding to this earlier. Where does your data reside? If you're if you're a European company and you really need to know that GDPR is getting adhered to, you need to ask about that. So that's just a high level set of things you should look at when you're assessing SOC providers. But then there's the question of how long does it take to do a transition? And here's a nice little eye chart that Jerry will talk to you about.
Yeah, so you could say, wow, that's really small. And yeah, it's a Gantt chart for project plan, but that thing's really small and I can't really see it. Well, one of the reasons it's small is to show you there's a lot of steps. But the other thing is, we don't want you to get bogged down by all the details. The thing is, if you notice, there's color coded because there's different sort of phases of a process, right? There's sort of the one phase, which is budgeting, which people don't think about, because if you're going to migrate a SOC, ideally what that implies is you might have two run at the same time. Like, why are you migrating? Because I'm not happy with my current provider. Well, most people are going to want a couple running in parallel so that you can make sure that you're catching all the things. You're used to what things are going. You get people trained and so on, which means you're probably paying for two at the same time. Plus, not only are you going to have to pay for other people, but you're going to have things like training, right? I'm going to have physical space for people potentially. So if I don't have the budget for two of them running at the same time, you got to plan for that. So there's the budgeting. Have contingency plans, right? So your hope is that the person that you're disappointed with is going to be replaced by somebody who you're liking, but you can't assume. You hope that's going to be the case, but you may find that the new person isn't any better than the old person. It sounded great in theory when I saw their presentations and I looked at their SOC and I was like, wow, that was very impressive. But now that they're doing it for me, maybe you're let down. So have contingency plans that don't wait till the end of it. Have contingency plans that maybe staying with your existing provider and giving them another chance. And I'll tell you this, if they know they're getting out and that's going to be a ton of money, maybe they're going to get a religion and all of a sudden they maybe will take a lot more time and effort to fix those issues. So maybe the contingency is giving them another chance, and maybe they'll waive some fees for things. They'll do some free training. They'll put more senior experienced people in there. It's a win-win for you, right? In the transition, maybe there'll be worst cases, they just get incrementally better as opposed to giving up the ghost. Best case scenarios, all of a sudden they're doing really, really good and maybe get another chance to keeping them with a lower price, with better services. Last scenario in your contingency is maybe we're going to have to do it ourselves if the new person isn't any better than the old person. So allow for those different contingencies. And the other thing is training. There's going to have to be training that's involved, not just the training of the new staff to understand your environment and how we maybe integrate with other operations, but the training of your people. How am I going to learn how to get along with these new people, both culturally, how it is that they're going to be passing information to me, and that sort of thing. Then, of course, you have to execute the transition.
Which is that tiny little thing at the end.
The tiny little green part is execute. But with all the planning, hopefully what you do is you built a bunch of detailed checklists on all the things you're going to do. Then you check them off. Are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And then there should be a formal handover. Once all of those things are done, it's now formal. Company B has now got this going forward. Company A doesn't. Now, when company A that's leaving, there should be detailed planning on how do you terminate these people. So not only I'm getting rid of their connections, I'm getting rid of their people's access to my systems. I'm making sure they turn in their badges. Let's make sure I don't leave any access both to the systems or the people or the applications that maybe they had access to. So think about all those things that I have to get out of there. The last thing I would throw down is once this transition's over, it's not over. You need to have a post-transition closeout. So I want to do exit interviews with the outgoing provider. What could I have done better myself? What could you have done better? Then do an after-action review with the ongoing person. How could we have done this transition better? What are the specific things, now that it's been going for a while, that I want you to take care of to fix and improve in the future? Do an after-action review with your own staff. What did we learn from this transition so that we can make our overall security operations better? And the final thing is, once you've got all that information and learning, there should be a final formal closeout with the company executives to sit there and formally say, we did this transition, we've accomplished it, our mission's accomplished. Here's the lessons learned, and here's our formal action plan for making it even better in the future. So those are some of my thoughts on the transition. It's holistic. Plan the budget. Don't forget about training. Have a contingency plan, and make sure that you capture the lessons learned so that you can take that issue into the future with other areas.
And the only thing I have to add to that comprehensive discussion is if you're looking at this chart and going, Johna, this is great. Jerry, this is great. But how come all the purple bars only go down to the green stuff? It's because if we put the rest of the chart on here, it would be way too small to see. But rest assured, we do have a transition map and a strategy for doing this. So if you are in the position of wanting to make the change, considering making a change, or making a change in SOC providers, call us. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Contact us. We are happy to help you with it. That's one of the offerings we provide. So just let us know.
Think about how small those things on the left would be if I stretched out for the entire time of the transition.
Exactly. So we have, there's a lot behind this, not just a bunch of talking heads. So with that, let's just kind of sum it up. I think in a nutshell, having a SOC is a good idea. So if you're watching this and saying, gee, maybe I better get a SOC, please do. It's a good idea. If you are not happy with your SOC, whether it's yourself or your current provider, consider saying so long SOC provider and move to another one. Develop a short list of providers across a range of types, a couple in each of those boxes. Consider including yourself on that list. Formalize those selection criteria, develop a detailed transition plan. And as Jerry said, keep a close eye on the performance and be prepared to make changes again if need be. Have that written into your contract. Anything else you want to add, Jerry, before we sort of wrap up?
I would just say feedback is a breakfast of champions. You can't manage what you don't measure. Have a plan, have intents, but turn those intents into something that you can measure for success. And then make sure you think about that, and always, at whatever plan you have for any activity, do an after-action review. Take your lessons learned to make yourself better in the future.
Excellent. And with that, I just want to highlight a couple of things. First of all, come talk to us if you are interested in doing any SOC transitions. We are happy to help. We can make this whole process a lot easier by doing a lot of the legwork and guiding you through the parts that we can't do for you. So let us know. Second, we have a couple more webinars coming up. Some great ones on February 14th, Valentine's Day. We are going to be talking about the 8 pillars of digital transformation. And if you think you are so done with digital transformation, you are over it, think again. You'll probably learn a few things from this one. Then a week after that, on February 22nd, we have Mastering the Metaverse. So if your company is getting involved in the metaverse, these are things you want to think about. These are the components that you should consider. So join us for that one. And we have a whole slew of upcoming webinars. So stay tuned for that. And again, last but not least, if you wish, if you've enjoyed this talk and you'd like some follow-on, remember that there's a report attached to this. You should check out the, check out the attachments. Also, please connect with me and with Jerry on LinkedIn. We yap a lot on LinkedIn. So if you have questions, comments, feedback, come hit us up on LinkedIn. Even better, join our Nemertes community. You can hit Nemertes.com and then go hit the community tab and apply for membership in our community. Jerry and I hang out there a lot. So with that, thank you very much and hope to hear from you.
Have a great day, everyone.